What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another edition of the Jays for Days podcast. I'm Josh. He's Josh. We got Jays Jumpers, Jaren Jackson Jr.'s, John Morant's, Joe Johnson's, Ja Raff's, of course. We've got Jays. We got him for days. Josh, how you doing?
We're going to get to the coaching stuff later because obviously we have some pretty incredible games to talk about. I do want to say one thing off the top, though. The transfer portal is probably the thing you and I have disagreed most on in the history of this podcast.
How so?
What?
I said, how so?
Oh, in terms of just how it operates, I will just always not feel good about it.
And I will always empower players to do whatever the hell they want to do because that's what coaches do.
Right, and it's specifically the one, the no sitting out, one transfer, all that stuff.
Sure.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do in terms of, because my argument has always been it's the best situation because of the NCAA dragging its feet and not getting something better out there.
Sure.
What? I don't know what I'm supposed to do though if coaches just decide players are no longer welcome on their teams. To your point about
at Rick Pitino, literally in his introduction press conference.
And Deion Sanders said the same thing at Colorado.
Yeah.
Some guys should just pack their bags.
Yeah.
He said something like that. I don't know how we're supposed to have any kind of conversation about anything other than complete free agency if that's how coaches are approaching it.
Yeah.
Just wanted to throw that out there. But pondering that.
I can't, you guys don't know. Before we hit record, Josh said, hey, let's do coaches at the end. And then responded to my how you doing question with the coach thing. Unbelievable. Just trying to keep me on my toes. But right. Yes, it's been a busy week in the coaching carousel portion of the college basketball schedule. No waiting for the tournament to end this time around. Not that there usually is, but there were several big names in the tournament that about roughly the time that they touched down in their respective towns after losing in the NCAA tournament were on their way to another school. But we'll get to that at the end. There are 4 Sweet 16 games that we need to talk about from Thursday evening. It is Friday morning at 8:10 in the morning. Hey, how are you? Thanks so much for joining us here on the Jays for Days podcast. Josh, let's start at Madison Square Garden. Madison Square Garden, Kansas State, Michigan State, 98-93 in overtime. Let me ask you, okay, my first question is, Markquis Nowell at Madison Square Garden or UConn Kemba at Madison Square Garden? Which one are you taking? Either way, your options are pretty spectacular. And what Markquis Nowell did last night in the NCAA tournament was pretty spectacular.
I'll go Kemba just because Markquis Nowell does have another All-American on his team.
Fair. The Kemba crossover and buzzer beater that he hit against Pitt is still the dirtiest college basketball play I've ever seen. Like, everyone knew Kemba was going to take a pull-up jumper there, and still somehow Pitt ended up with a big guy switched onto him. That's the underrated part of that play, how you let that happen. And then the poor guy just got absolutely cooked. Yeah. But that is fair. For the record, I would take UConn Kemba over Kansas State Markquis Nowell, but last night it's a conversation.
I will take any New York City guard playing in Madison Square Garden. That's the other part of this I've decided.
Mm-hmm.
Give me all. I mean, you'll take the New York guards generally, but give me all. When the stakes are highest, when the lights are shining the brightest, give me those New York guards playing at home all day long.
Mm-hmm.
There's some kind of magical power in that combination. And yeah, you saw it last night with Markquis Nowell.
Not New Jersey, though. New Jersey tough? Is that what they called? Who do they call New Jersey tough?
Matt Farrell.
Right, Matt Farrell. Right. Not New Jersey tough. Not to be mistaken. Not to be mistaken. But yes, 98-93, Markquis Nowell breaking an NCAA tournament record, 20 points, 19 assists, Josh, to just 2 turnovers. That's an assist to turnover ratio, by the way, of 8.5 to 1. Excuse me, no, 9.5 to 1. Sorry.
Yep.
Sorry, it's early. 8.5 to 1. He had 5 steals as well, including a steal on the final possession to seal things. And generally, I'm against the whole "the game is over, I'm still going to take a shot" kind of thing. But for some reason and like the way the crowd reacted to his layup hanging on the rim for a second was like the ball going in would have decided the game.
Right.
Like everyone was kind of like staring at it, and the game was already over. But that made me laugh because it kind of felt like that. But for him to make the defense play at the end was the icing on top.
Yeah. And in his defense, he was essentially throwing the ball up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He just happened to throw it
he
up.
He wasn't essentially throwing. He was scoring.
Well, yes. No. But from trying to get the ball out of harm's way, basically.
Yeah, but he could have ran to the left corner of the floor and did the exact same thing.
He was trying to score. But he wasn't. There was an additional purpose in terms of.
It was not the same thing as the FAU guy in the round of 32 trying to throw down a tomahawk dunk. Right.
Exactly. That's my point. Yes.
It's the thing we've been talking about Kansas State all year, right? You got two really, really spectacular performances in different. Keontae Johnson was 22-6, 10 of 18 from the field, just really, really solid. And a big part of the discussion entering this game was, can anybody on Michigan State's basketball team guard Keontae Johnson? The answer was no. And then Markquis Nowell did what he did, but elsewhere, you had 4 different Wildcats in double figures in this game, outside of Keontae Johnson and Markquis Nowell. And against really good teams, you're probably going to have some games where that's not the case. But when that does happen, Kansas State can beat anybody, even on a night when you get some good performances from the Spartan side of things as well, even when Michigan State shoots 50% from the field and knocks down 13 of their 25 3-pointers.
Yeah. And, Ish Massoud had a couple, not only did he score 15 points, he had a couple of huge shots, including the one at the end.
Yep. Their bench was 10 of 13 from the floor, by the way.
Yeah. 26 points between Ghassan and Massoud.
Yep.
This was a very interesting defensive strategy from Michigan State. This is where I've really sort of come down on this game. They were so worried about Nowell and Johnson, and particularly Nowell, that it's almost been, it felt to me like it was the opposite of what we've seen most of the season, where make those two guys score, 45. And if they do, because they will sometimes, you just got to tip your hat and say they were better than us. Michigan State was running all kinds of help defense at both of them. Mm-hmm. And you had, and this is, Nowell's court vision was ridiculous. Some of those passes he made, the things he saw, absolutely incredible. There were also a lot of really wide open players with backdoor cuts to the basket. And the second half was better. They finally just started saying, hey, we're going to just try and stay in front of him and not throw 3 guys at him. Mm-hmm. And maybe, when he's 5 inches shorter than the guy guarding him, he's not going to finish every time inside the paint. Mm-hmm. And he still did what he did. But that's part of the story of, and they hit their threes. But even on that last possession, it was a good example of it. I think it was Hoggard. Keontae Johnson was cutting away from the basket out to the wing, and he jumped just for a second. I think Jaden Akins was the guy trailing him. I would have to go back and watch it more closely, but I think Akins was fine, and Hoggard still jumped that way a little bit, and that cleared the space to get that pass into Ish Massoud. Mm-hmm. If Hoggard doesn't leave, that pass doesn't come in. And that was the story of the game and that's the pressure that Kansas State puts on you, right? Because if they hadn't been so aggressive, maybe Nowell and Johnson go for 67 instead of 42. Mm-hmm. But they put so much pressure on those two that everybody else's lives were made so easy, and they all took advantage. And both ends of the floor, what Naquan Tomlin was doing, Ghassan had that block and hit all 5 of his shots. We talked about Ish Massoud. You got contributions all over the place. Cam Carter hit 2 threes. It was Kansas State's offense at its very best. And I was just stunned at how bad defensively Michigan State was. And the other thing I was thinking about, especially in the first half, when you look up and you see the score is 43-38, this Michigan State team is not beating, and they came awfully close. You're not beating Kansas State playing on Kansas State's terms when you're this Michigan State team.
They turned around and did basically the exact same thing, right? 44-39 in the second half.
Yeah, they were
as close
they
as
were
can.
phenomenal offensively. Yeah. I did. Just give me in that kind of game. Give me Kansas State.
It felt like all week Michigan State talked about Keontae Johnson and Markquis Nowell, and then had to on the fly kind of go against the instinct that had been kind of drilled into them all week, right? Because the you just can't make that mistake on an inbounds pass late in a game. Like you can't like there are two things that you can't let happen. You can't let a guy coming from basically the elbow catch the ball on the block coming towards the basket, and or like, you know, getting a pin down screen and going up for an oop like over the backboard, and you can't let them get a pass across the baseline underneath the basket. Those are the most important things that you can't, like, even give them a fading away contested three in that short corner before you give them, because the thing that makes that other shot so good is that guy is catching it square at the basket already.
Exactly.
And you just can't let that happen. And it kind of felt like the way, and I can't remember who it was in that position. Do you remember?
I think it was Hogard.
Was it Hogard?
Yeah.
It just kind of felt like his instincts all week were to don't let Keontae Johnson get anything free. And as a result, they just kind of forgot the fundamentals of guarding an inbounds play, and that you just can't let, like, because it wasn't even like he got a bounce pass, like, kind of through a tight window and the guy caught it with his back to the basket kind of thing. Like, he was wide open. Like, you just can't let that happen.
That pass was going toward the basket, not away from it.
Yes.
Essentially. Yeah.
Right. So that in it just kind of on this particular night, 11 of 24 was enough to get it done from the 3-point line. Right. If they make one less, the game is different.
The one that Nowell threw up.
Yeah.
But I don't even know what that was.
But very, very, very cool. Just into and I love, I think it's kind of trendy to not understand what's so cool about Madison Square Garden, but the only way, and I saw some of that before the game, because the crowd wasn't super impressive before this game started, and it's 6:00 in New York City and it's Michigan State and Kansas State. What were you expecting? But it was awesome by the end, and it just delivers. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to describe it to you other than it just delivers. It delivers some of the biggest moments on the biggest stages of certainly college hoops. And we can have a conversation about how long it's been since the biggest stages of the NBA have happened in Madison Square Garden. But it just delivers. And for whatever reason, and if it's just the name, then fine. But for whatever reason, when things are intense and tight late at Madison Square Garden, it feels different than when it's late and intense at, American Airlines Arena. It just feels different. And last night was the case as well.
It feels different when the Knicks are playing a playoff game.
Yeah.
No matter how good they are, how hopeless the actual playoff hunt is, right? We saw that a couple years ago. It's just a special environment.
For sure.
I'm going to say this because I don't know if anybody else wants to. I need my fifth-year point guard. Markquis Nowell's played 5 total years of college basketball at this point. I need my fifth-year point guard, emotional leader, not to jack up 2 logo threes in essential possessions. I do. As brilliant as he was, and I get that's part of the beauty of what Jerome Tang has done, is that he just lets these guys play. And more times than not, they figure it out, and they figured it out in this game. That second one especially. I mean, I think so highly of Markquis Nowell that my bar for him is so high. What? They can't stop you. You've scored 82 points in regulation, 98, including the overtime. Don't bail them out twice. And especially on a game where he broke the NCAA tournament record for assists. Make somebody do something. Get your teammates involved. This will
you cannot ask him to get his teammates involved more when he has 19 assists. You can't say that.
No, but that's what I'm saying, is that he's doing it so effortlessly that he is settling because he could have done that. He could have done whatever he wanted. He was brilliant. And to choose that shot. And look, it worked out because Hogard tipped it and Masood hit the shot. Everything went their way after that. That is always going to be a sticking point with me. If he was having a phenomenal shooting game, maybe it's a little bit different. Right? But he's not Steph. Steph has the right to take that shot because Steph's the best shooter of all time. Steph can shoot from half court for all I care.
And perhaps the better comparison is like Trae Young. He's also not Trae Young, which is like, from a stature perspective, a little closer. But
yeah, because Trae Young's a really good passer too. But I'm going to throw it out there. Because that's the kind of stuff that comes back to bite you in a different game if things go differently.
That might be the most Josh Doring thing I've ever heard you say on this podcast.
Oh, just wait. I got more coming.
Like, it's pretty high on the list. High on the list. I'd have taken that shot in a pickup basketball game, so but also I'm not the emotional fifth-year leader of an Elite Eight team.
And if you take it, look, he had 10 assists in the first half. If you take it with 5 minutes left in the first half, that's something different.
Sure.
That is the shot that you are putting your season on the line with, right? Because if he airballs that and it doesn't get tipped, Michigan State's got it's a 1-point game and they're playing one shot to win.
Mm-hmm. For
and
what it's worth, he did turn around and make the defensive play.
Yes, absolutely. And that was a really risky play that I'm going to say he just had the instincts that he knew he was going to get the ball. Because he could have fouled a 3-point shooter, but you're right. He got the ball, he made the play, he delivered. He was brilliant. I'm so happy for him that he gets this story. They are amazing, and they should make the Final Four, which is absolutely incredible.
And what's really spectacular is that either Florida Atlantic or Kansas State, either Florida Atlantic or the team picked last in the Big 12 is going to make the Final Four, and that's super fun. Anything else in this game?
That was a terrific offensive performance from Michigan State. Just want to give them their props. That one's going to sting, not only because obviously they were so close to making the Elite Eight, but also just the way that this bracket played out. Mm-hmm. To me, this was a winner goes to the Final Four game. And
see, I'm not sure I agree with that.
And it might be a little bit arrogant to say that.
Mostly because it's either like now we kind of have like two teams that I kind of feel like it's their destiny to make the Final Four. But if Michigan State is playing Florida Atlantic, it's like, okay, you're getting Florida Atlantic in the Elite Eight. Somewhere the juju is on Florida Atlantic's side. Somewhere in the juju. But that has much less to do with logic and much more to do with like George Mason's been to the Final Four kind of thing.
You just don't for a school that's been through so much this season for a time as
someone said that to me last night.
Yeah,
about Michigan State as a university,
and just having this open up the way it did, showing up and winning. Going toe to toe with a team in a game played in a way that does not suit you when your defense is just not there because they're so good offensively. To still find a way to take it down to the last possession, to send it to overtime, and to come. It's just the awful side of this tournament is that both those teams deserve to win, and one of them obviously has to lose.
Yeah. Gonzaga, UCLA. My favorite thing about this game, not actually, but so for some reason there's a glitch on the ESPN website right now, and it says that nobody played a single minute for Gonzaga last night.
Or UCLA, I think.
No, there are some players on UCLA. Yes. Amari Bailey and Jaime Jaquez each played more than 34 minutes, but nobody else
played more than 11.
Yeah, that's correct. So Drew Timme had 36 and 13, along with 4 assists and 2 blocks, and didn't play a single minute. 16 of 24 shooting. I mean that. Talk about efficiency. He's scoring
an infinite with 36 and 13.
Yeah, he walked into the building with 36 points. Here's. First of all, I learned that not for a single second do you go to sleep thinking that an NCAA tournament game is over, because even when Gonzaga is up by 10 with 120 seconds left, stuff can happen. But this was very much a tale of two halves. 46-33, UCLA led at the end of the first 20 minutes. Gonzaga wins the second half by 16. UCLA goes on an 11-minute run, 10 and a half minutes, without scoring a field goal. It kind of felt like, Amari Bailey and Jaime Jaquez were the only two on the floor for most of the game, so no wonder. It kind of felt like a beat-up UCLA team ran out of gas in the second half of this game, and it kind of feels like, and I'm going to be mad if Gonzaga wins a national championship after I've picked them the last 3 years to win the national championship. I'm going to be a little upset about it. But this kind of felt like the game, because like every team, almost every team, at least every team that's not historically good, right? Like that Baylor team didn't get lucky anywhere, but that Baylor team is one of the 10 best college basketball teams.
Still
ever.
had that Villanova game though,
but still had a close game. But a lot of teams that go on to win a national championship have a game that, whether it's the Virginia and Purdue game in the Elite Eight, or it's a game like this, that you kind of feel like that UCLA brought enough to the table that if they were just healthy, they would have won this basketball game.
Oh, without question.
But they weren't, and Gonzaga did just enough that even on a night that you got goose eggs from two of your five starting guards, two of your five starting players, and like Nolan Hickman and Nasir Bolton had 0 points and 5 field goals. Right, you're starting backcourt. Now, Markquis Smith made up for that a little bit,
yes,
having a really, really nice game. And having the type of game that you envisioned when he transferred to Gonzaga. Big physical guy that nobody in UCLA's backcourt really knew what to do with. Even on that night, Gonzaga found a way to claw out this game, and that just kind of feels like the type of game that maybe it's going to go Gonzaga's way this year, and they got through a game that maybe they shouldn't have, and headlined by an all-time Drew Timme performance.
Yeah, and you could tell from the very beginning when he took, something like 7 of their first 8 shots, because UCLA was not double teaming him. And I think somebody on the broadcast even said this. 2 minutes into the game, I went, he might go for 50. And he ended at 36 because things changed a little bit in the second half. But yeah, he was just doing his thing, and especially after he hit the 3. You just went, oh, yeah. Drew. Then he started taking the ball at the court. Drew Timme was not messing around.
No.
My big question coming out of this is to your point about UCLA, right? Obviously, this team is not built to be playing this kind of rotation. You had 2 important pieces, your 2 best defensive players unavailable.
Yep.
Is this more about Gonzaga figuring out how to play defense in the second half and how to guard a ball screen? Or is this more about UCLA just not having the energy and the stamina to keep this up in a game that was played at Gonzaga's pace for 40 minutes? Because that's the question moving forward. Gonzaga was awful defensively in the first half. And then, like you said, UCLA couldn't hit a shot for half of the second half. Obviously, it's a combination of both, but which does it lean more in the direction of? Because you and I are both big believers. You have to be good defensively to win a national championship. You can survive individual games, but that was nowhere near good enough.
Right.
And even at the end, why did UCLA get back in the game? Because Jaime Jaquez got fouled twice and didn't get fouled hard enough to actually prevent him from scoring the basket.
Right.
Pick one or the other. If you're winning in the position Gonzaga was, either you got to foul him really hard, or just give him the 2 points, because the 2 points don't hurt you as much as the and one. And they did it twice. And then there were some turnovers in there, missed free throws, just everything that could have went wrong. And Amari Bailey then drilled that 3. Amari Bailey is quietly, well, now his college career is probably over, but he turned into what he was supposed to be.
Yeah, he didn't have the type of year that turns you into a hot commodity going into the NBA draft, but he certainly had an incredibly productive 1 year of college. And that will never be the sexy way to describe a one-and-done's college career, but considering the talent that was on this team already and the veteran leadership on this team already, because that's the secret, right? It's really hard to be a one and done guy that's a hot commodity in the NBA draft if you're on a team that has veteran leadership, right? Because Jaime Jaquez is going to have the ball, and Tiger Campbell is going to have the ball. Like, that's just how it's going to work. But yeah, I totally agree. Had a really productive year, and I think someone will ultimately be happy when they end up with him on their NBA roster.
And when his team needed him to step into a bigger role, he did it seamlessly. That's the other part of this for me too, is not only did you see the flashes, but you saw, oh, this guy can go carry a scoring load offensively. You know, maybe he's not going to be option one, but this guy can really score. And you saw the athleticism. You saw him take that responsibility, so you know that can translate. Because that's part of what you don't normally see is, right, because they're not asked to do that. So you're kind of betting on the potential, whereas you're betting on both the potential and the production with Bailey, which is exciting.
And I also think we saw him, the game just slow down for him in general.
Sure.
He just looked more under control and like he had a better feel for the game than he did at the beginning of the year. It just kind of felt like he was raw athleticism and potential at the beginning of the year, and looked much more like it looked. The way I'll put it is that if UCLA had to depend on him to take a bigger role 3 months ago, I'm not sure it would have gone well. But at this point, even on the biggest stage, even though it wasn't right, obviously it wasn't quite enough. But that's not a knock. That's just you played your season as one team and you got to the point in the tournament in the Sweet 16 where you had to function as a different one. And that's always hard to do, but I completely agree with you.
And then the other thing for Gonzaga, before I get to my big point here, it is funny, right? And you texted me before the whole ending happened of saying, I'm so mad Gonzaga's going to win this thing in the year I didn't pick them in the year. It makes no sense when, they're not great defensively and their guard play was really
is
bad
not good
in this
enough.
game.
Is not good enough. Yeah.
Right. And yet here they are. And it kind of feels like they're the team of destiny to a certain extent. But Markquis Smith saved them in large part, and Hunter Salas too. Those two guys just were the guards in the second half and things got a lot better. So you got to give them credit as well. Like you were saying with Markquis Smith, that's part of the beauty of this roster.
Reason, right, that their backcourt was supposed to be so good this year, right? That you felt like there were four guys, and like, unfortunately, it's been more times than not this year, at least in big games. It's been, can we just get two of the four, rather than it feels like the other team has to play guard roulette and just decide which one they want to hurt them. Yes. It feels more of like, let's scrap together a backcourt than our backcourt is a weapon on top of what our front court does.
Yes. But the beauty of having four guys is right. As long as two of them are playing well, you ride those guys, and that's exactly what happened.
Right.
Julian Strawther is a very, very brave man for putting Drew Timme's college career
I saw you tweet this.
in his hands. This is just one of those things, again, right? We're going to talk about it this way because he hit the shot.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to explore, what is the narrative if he misses that and they lose? Because there is not a player in the country more deserving of going out on their own terms after what he has done for a program than Drew Timme. Drew Timme doesn't have to take that shot. But I 100% want Drew Timme making the decision. That was not, this is a wide open three in the rhythm of the offense. I'm going to take it because I'm a good 3-point shooter. This might be the best shot we get. That was not that at all, obviously.
Are you sure that wasn't the play that they were running? Are you sure that that's not what Markquis said? Okay,
you want me to tell you exactly what I have? I have the quotes here because I wanted to look that up too.
Okay, because it's basically a carbon copy of the shot that Chris Jenkins made in the national championship game, and I refuse to believe that that's not exactly the shot Jay Wright wanted in that moment.
Oh, right. Which, okay,
and
yes,
and like, I'm sorry, there's like not even Julian Strawther. And Julian Strawther has never seen a shot that he doesn't like, at least not this year. Clearly, he was enabled this year by Markquis, and this year didn't see a shot that he didn't like. Not even he takes a logo three with that much confidence with 7 seconds left in the game, unless he was told to do it.
Okay, here you go. You ready for his quote?
Yeah, hit me.
Okay, this is him. Well, first I want to appreciate.
Is this Markquis or is this Julian Strother?
This is Julian Strother.
Okay.
But first, I'd like to give you Drew Timmy's thoughts on it. Drew Timmy said, I mean, Julian, man, he just took on all of GU and just buttered that thing.
That's
which
fantastic.
Is a terrific Drew Timmy quote. Strother said,
with that mustache and everything.
Yeah. Strother said, the play was a little dribble, handoff action, see if we could get their defense on their heels a bit. And initially when coach drew it up, he kind of drew, just search it up a little bit, maybe go downhill. And I kind of just asked him, can I shoot it? If no one steps up on me, do you want me to shoot it? And he was like, absolutely. And then I shot it. So you are correct.
Here's why I don't think like, and I don't know what the secondary action would have been, right? Because there had to have been a secondary action, right? If that didn't
I would argue
work,
that. Yeah, I would argue that shot was the secondary action.
Rather than going downhill. Well, he
Exactly.
shot that. Like in his head, it was a primary action.
Well, right. When Markquis said absolutely you can shoot it, he went, gotcha, coach.
He was going to shoot it because they stepped up on the three. Like the guy was there. Like Strother just decided he was going to shoot it. I would be curious to know specifically what Drew Timmy's role in the play was.
Yes.
Because Drew Timmy doesn't move like he's involved in the play. Like he's not, because like I would be more curious with did you just decide you were going to muscle up, that you were just going to one up Drew Timmy on this play? If it was like Drew Timmy who had made the inbounds pass, or it was Drew Timmy who had done the little pitch back, or Drew Timmy was making a move to set a ball screen, he wasn't doing any of those things. So maybe it's just we have one of the best players in the country on our team, and you have to worry about what he might be doing, even though he's not going to do anything on this play. Or if there was a secondary action they didn't get to, because he took the shot with 7.5 seconds left.
Right. That's the other thing. Yeah.
And I'm way pro. Like if you have 12 seconds and you're down by 1, I'm massively pro take a shot with 7 seconds left, because if you miss it and you're only down by 1, you're going to get the ball back if you foul, and you have a chance to get an offensive rebound and get perhaps the best shot you can get in that moment.
Especially with the way they were rebounding the ball in this game.
Right. So I'm super pro that. So I have no issue with that whatsoever. But I'll put it this way. If Timmy was supposed to be involved in that play, if there was a ball screen he was supposed to set, he didn't come to it fast enough. Mm-hmm. He should have moved faster if he was supposed to, but the way that the play shook out, I'm not totally sure he was supposed to be there.
Yeah.
I think that was just kind of the way that, but you're right. I'm not sure who has the bigger balls, Julian Strother or Markquis.
Right.
If that was the play that he drew up, I'm not sure who has the bigger balls there.
Yeah. My thing is very simply, Strother decided that was the shot that his team was going to more or less live or die on.
Sure.
When he could have got downhill, he could have passed, they could have reset, right, because they had time. I'm with you that I don't have an issue with that shot going up early. And I don't have an issue with somebody other than Timmy taking it, because there is value in the Drew Timmy's down there and he has, whatever it was, 36 points. So we're going to try and do something different defensively, which is going to leave somebody open. There's value to all of that. And Strother is obviously a really good 3-point shooter. It's not like him ending up with a shot from the perimeter is a bad option.
Sure.
But you decided it was going to be the logo 3.
That's true.
And look, he made it.
Can you imagine? Can we talk about, maybe that's the perfect, sorry to cut you off. That's a perfect, like Chris Jenkins took a 3 from 6 inches behind the 3-point line.
Right.
Can we, that just might be the perfect example. If you put those two side by side, the evolution of the game of basketball, they ran the same play, but they had to run the same play 3 feet further away from the basket for their 3-point shooter to get a good look. And Chris Jenkins is one of the best 3-point shooters to ever play college basketball. Like in terms of I need a shot to go down, where does Chris Jenkins rank on that list? Pretty high, right?
Yes.
Pretty high.
And
even Julian Strother, who is not as good of a 3-point shooter as Chris Jenkins was at Villanova, needed 3 more feet further from the basket to get a less clean look than Chris Jenkins did.
And that's the other difference I want to harp on for 1 second. That Chris Jenkins play was drew up for Chris Jenkins because there was no clear option A on that team, right? That's the beauty. They were all NBA players. So a Chris Jenkins 3 that clean of a look is a very satisfactory end result if you're Jay Wright.
Sure.
You have Drew Timme. And right, maybe this is a conversation for Markquis rather than Julian Strawther, based on, because I went and found these quotes because I wanted to see. I was thinking the exact same thing of what was actually happening here.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know exactly what would have happened if he didn't take the shot. But that's the other difference, is that you are deciding the ball is not somehow, some way going to get to Drew Timme. And whoever you is, maybe that's Strawther, maybe that's Markquis, maybe it's a combination where Few wasn't just going to go to Timme immediately, and Strawther decided it wasn't going to Timme at all. You know, I just sit here wondering what the conversation is like if he misses that shot, Gonzaga loses after blowing that lead.
And certainly as a guy who came in here and reamed Purdue's guards for not getting Zach Edey the ball more consistently against FDU, I can't write that off. It's a completely fair point. I can't talk about the play without there being at least some recognition of that, with the way that I was absolutely livid with Purdue's guards at the end of that basketball game. But
so really where I've come down at the end of all of this is just watching last night, as amazing as it was, it just reinforced to me that we just don't have any we don't have any great teams here.
I don't think so.
The teams that won took
maybe
three
UConn.
logo throughs.
Maybe UConn.
And that was the other thought I had as well. Maybe the Fighting Danny Hurley's here, because that's the thing that occurred.
Real quick, though, let's talk about the Fighting Dusty Mays first.
Okay.
62-55. Listen, one of these teams found a way to score 40 points and a half against Tennessee, and the first team to do that was going to beat them. Like, even in a game where they scored 22 in the first half, they had an offensive half, and Tennessee hadn't given up an offensive half like that yet. And I haven't gone back and looked, but nobody had scored 40 points on them in the tournament and a half yet. And Florida Atlantic got it going in the second half, and the Owls marching on. They needed 62 points to beat Tennessee by 7, and that's exactly what we thought was going to happen at some point. At some point, Tennessee was going to have the night where it was like, okay, yep, they don't have Zakai Ziegler. They have no offensive creativity. They're 6 of 23 from the three-point line. And when that happens, the margin of error is basically non-existent, and it certainly doesn't exist to a large enough extent that they were able to beat Florida Atlantic on this particular night.
It is remarkable to kind of put together in the same sentence. Yeah, Florida Atlantic started knocking down some threes in the second half, and that kind of turned the tide. And they still shot 29.6% from three.
That's correct. That's correct.
But that was part of the difference, is particularly Michael Forrest. Michael Forrest came in and knocked down those couple threes, and that really turned things around. And once you get the lead, that's another thing about this Tennessee team that we haven't really talked about too much. Outside of, I mentioned it I don't remember what game it was, but when they go down and they need to score, and they can't just kind of fuel their offense with their defense because they need buckets, they get so discombobulated so quickly, even with Ziegler in there. There is this panic that sets in when they know they have to score. If you can just get a lead, and Florida Atlantic played good enough defense in the first half to at least hang in there, right? They only gave up 27 points. Yes, they only scored 22, like you said. But they just gave themselves a chance. They made a couple plays, hit a couple threes, and all of a sudden they're up 5. And then it just compounded from there, because that stress sets in when you're Tennessee and you're bad offensively and you need to score. And you saw that again, where the last 8 or so minutes of this game were very comfortable for Florida Atlantic, because they just kept getting some stops, kept scoring enough points to keep it, kind of keep Tennessee at arm's distance. And they are an awfully good basketball team. And here, I do think Kansas State's going to win that game, but that's not because Florida Atlantic isn't good. This is not some Cinderella story. This is a really good basketball team that took advantage of the path in front of them, just like any other high major team that you could say the same thing of.
No, they're going to lose that game because Kansas State is led by a New York guard at Madison Square Garden. That's why they're going to lose that game. Real quick, the splits. First half for Florida Atlantic, 9 of 24 from the field, 3 of 14 from the three-point line, 1 of 2 from the stripe. Second half, 12 of 26, not much better, but better. 9 percentage points better. 5 of 13 from the 3-point line, 2 more makes on 1 less attempt, 39%, 38.5. And then they went to the free throw line 14 times, 11 of 14. And part of that is because you're up late in the game. But still, just offense guy. Yeah, Tennessee's offense is a lot like a rookie quarterback who looks really great in week 7 against, the Jets. But then when you need them to score with a ricochet shot at the Jets, I apologize.
Yeah, I was gonna say what?
I mean, Jets, but also like I can't, the soap opera that's going to come with Aaron Rodgers in New York is just fantastic. But when you need that rookie quarterback to go down and score with 3 minutes left and in the divisional round,
outside of the system,
right? Sometimes things get a little bit dicier. And really in this situation, it's like that team, but also like the rookie quarterback they drafted in the 6th round instead of the 2nd round, right? Or in the 1st round. But Florida Atlantic 62-55, really, like I said, the game that we thought Tennessee was going to have when they lost. They just weren't gonna score enough. The other team was gonna have a good half, whether it was the 1st or 2nd, and they just weren't gonna be able to keep up. Yeah, Speaking of not keeping up.
Oh, sorry. Real quick before we get to that game.
Yeah, go ahead.
I really hope, because I saw some, the push alerts and the headlines and stuff about how we have another stunning upset. I really hope that's not how we're talking about that game. A, that's a 9 seed versus a 4 seed, and B, that's what are they at now? 34 win team. Actually, at this moment, they have the most wins in the country because Houston's still at 33.
Trivia time. Florida Atlantic is what at KenPom right now? Granted, after some NCAA tournament wins, but still, Florida Atlantic is what at KenPom right now?
22?
Higher.
18?
Higher. Just barely.
14?
17.
Wow.
So that's a 17 at KenPom, 33-3 team, beating a 7 at KenPom, 25-10 team.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not that different. It's certainly not as different as the seed line suggests.
Right. I am not. And I saw our friend, bracketologist extraordinaire Lucas Harkin say, I don't usually like to kind of go back and relitigate seeding, but it was just so clear that they were underseeded, and obviously that's the case. That was the first thing you tweeted on Selection Sunday, I think. At least one of the things I remember seeing, he was like, LOL, a 31-3 9 seed. Okay. Yeah. I'm not here for the slander. We got to put this in perspective. That was 2 evenly matched teams, and the one that's playing better won.
Yep. For sure. I agree completely. The team playing better won the game in the West Region Sweet 16 as well. The number 4 UConn Huskies over the number 8 seed Arkansas Razorbacks. 88-65, Josh, was the final score of this game.
Might not even have been that close.
UConn 46 points in the first half to Arkansas's 29 and 29, and this one was never particularly close. Jordan Hawkins finally, you know how long I've been waiting to look up and see Jordan Hawkins have 24 on 13 shots? You know how long I've been waiting for that? Against a real basketball team. 9 of 9 from the free throw line. Thank you. Adama Sanogo was awesome as well. 18 on 11 shots. 18 and 8 for him. Couple blocks as well. Alex Caravan added 11 on a perfect 5 of 5 from the field as well. I'm not ready to say that UConn is the best team in the country, but, quietly, right, they had this really, really ugly stretch at the beginning of Big East play, right? They go 1-5. They go 3-0 to start conference play. They beat Butler, Georgetown, and Villanova. And then they lose to Xavier and Providence, both on the road, both respectable losses. Get a Creighton win, and then lose 3 straight to Marquette, Seton Hall, and St. John's. Get another Butler win, because that's what every team did. They beat Butler by a combined 50 points. But don't worry, Butler beat an Elite 8 team. So, and then lost to Xavier. So between December 31st and January 25th, they had 6 of their 8 losses. They only lost twice since then. Both of them were to top 25 teams, one to Creighton, a team still playing in this tournament, and to Marquette. a 70-68 loss to number 6.
Yeah, that's the Big East tournament one, right?
Right.
Yeah, there was a flip a coin game.
So we very quickly went from UConn might be the best team in the country to UConn kind of fell off the face of the earth, and on February 1st is out of the Big East regular season race. And that happened quickly, and they've just quietly gotten back to really high-level basketball. They are one of the teams left in the tournament that fits the criteria of a national champion. Top 5 offensive efficiency for them. You know, the kind of rule is top 40 offense, top 22 defense. The arbitrary lines that we've set just because, I mean, like it was like 13 defense until Baylor won it as the 22nd. So like it could move, but like they fit the criteria. And they're playing some darn good basketball right now and absolutely flex their muscles on an Arkansas team that was kind of gaining some momentum, and their momentum came to a screeching halt against the Huskies in the Sweet 16. 88-65 it probably wasn't that close, like you said. And the fighting Dan Hurley's dominated the basketball game. And is there anything specific that you'd like to say about this game, about UConn, about anything?
The final score pretty much speaks for itself. The one thing I was sitting there thinking about was this Arkansas team it became very clear immediately. This Arkansas team had no chance without Trevin Brazile.
Yep.
Now, is Trevin Brazile making up 23 points? No. They ran into a juggernaut. But those two bigs, you have no chance if you don't have your center. Mm-hmm. It really was that simple.
And then Donovan Clingan just played. They used that 13 minutes. It's fine. It's like he just doesn't need to play that many more.
It's almost like their coach was listening to you. All right. Yeah, there was one of these teams that's playing well enough to advance. The other, I mean, look, Arkansas just beat Kansas. It's also that difficult trying to come back from that, right? Mm-hmm. And do it again, match the intensity again, and do it in a team that's almost the exact opposite of what you just saw in Kansas, right? Kansas has no quote-unquote big. Obviously, KJ Adams is the center, but KJ Adams is, 6'9"? Right. He is not Adama Sanogo and Donovan Clingan. Very different player.
He's like roughly half of Donovan.
Exactly. In a very real way. Yeah.
Yeah. Like literally.
The matchup this was a story of, one team playing much better than the other one, and the matchup not doing any favors for the team that was already going to have a difficult time. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I mean, you look at this field, they're as capable of doing this as anybody. And also, we're going to get a phenomenal game. We need to see how today goes. I'm getting to the point where I'm feeling like the winner of that region might just win the whole thing. But I'm not there yet, though. I want to see what happens in, what is that, the Midwest, with Houston and Texas first. And does Alabama get past San Diego State? But
yeah. I think where I've come down on the NCAA tournament, because I like where this Elite Eight is heading. I like the UConn Gonzaga game. Like, Kansas State is a 3 seed. I also just don't it doesn't feel like they're a 3 seed. That's no disrespect to Kansas State. That's not a commentary on their quality of basketball. But Kansas State, FAU, like if you told me before the season that Kansas State and FAU were going to play in the Elite Eight and to ask me to guess their seed lines, I would guess FAU on the 12 line at best.
Yep. Right. And
I would guess Kansas State coming from the other side at a 7 seed at best. And it's a 3-9, which is just not that. So I like that, even though that kind of feels, and that region is kind of your wild region this year. But elsewhere, right, we get a UConn and Gonzaga, which is a 3 versus 4. But we're
feels like more like a 1 versus 2.
Right. Or at the worst, a 2 versus 3. Yeah. I guess you can't have a 2 versus 3 in the Elite Eight, can you? No, you cannot, because the 2 versus 3 just played in the Sweet 16, Joshua. But it feels more like a 1 versus 2. And as long as Houston beats Miami. You can give me either of those other teams. Like Houston versus Texas would be my preferred game, but if you have Xavier there, I have no issue with that. And as long as Creighton beats Princeton and Alabama if you get Alabama Creighton, like that's also like a game that is probably closer to a 1 versus 2 than it is a 1 versus 6, right? In terms of when Creighton is healthy, or at least a 1 versus 3. But I like this kind of that the overwhelming majority of your Elite Eight matchups are elite teams, or at least as close as we're getting to elite this year. And then maybe you have a game that's something like Florida Atlantic versus Kansas State. And anyway, I enjoy that. And I kind of hope that today's games, while I hope they're entertaining, kind of finish off that kind of version of the Elite Eight.
Because it could get real interesting if there are some upsets today.
Right. We could also get imagine Princeton, San Diego State playing the Elite Eight
for the right to play Kansas State or Florida Atlantic in the Final Four.
Yeah. How about that? But yes, anything else on last night's games before we talk quickly about coaches?
Let's jump to the coaches.
Who do you want to start with? Your multiple choice is Cooley, Pitino, Shrewsberry.
Yeah, let's start Pitino.
Okay. Richard Pitino parlaying his Iona performance into okay, here's my first question. Why are people still taking the St. John's job? Will you explain that to me? Is it just the hubris of I can turn that program around? It's got to be, right? I mean, I'm sure there's
part of it,
right, Big East
especially for Rick Pitino,
right? All of those other things, but and Pitino's perhaps a little bit different. But that's who's gonna we'll talk about Shrewsberry here in a second, and we'll talk about Cooley. Those are two, and Iona. St. John's is only obviously a better job than Iona because St. John's is a Big East team and Iona is not. But Iona's been to the tournament far more times recently than St. John's. So what say you about Pitino ending up at St. John's?
Well, here is the thing about St. John's, though. That same logic about the Garden applies at least to a degree to St. John's.
Okay.
That is New York's college basketball team. Now, you need to make
Iona,
New York.
Perhaps. Is Iona in New York? That was just a guess. I don't think it's in New York. Is it in New York?
Yes, I believe so.
Iona might be New York's college basketball team.
The other part of that I was going to say is
I got you.
You need to make people
Iona,
care.
Yes. Yeah. New Rochelle, New York.
Okay. There you
While
go.
you're talking, I'm going to find what civilization New Rochelle is closest.
Okay. Very similar to LA. You need to make people care in those cities because there's so much to do. There's so many sports going on. The Knicks exist. The Nets exist for whatever that's worth.
New Rochelle is a suburb of New York City.
Okay, yeah.
Of Newark. It's further. It's further north than Newark, and is right across. It's like a stone's throw from Greenwich and Stamford and that kind of area.
Gotcha.
But it's really just it's really just up the river a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So you have to win for people to care. Sure. But if you do, there is something that special that can happen. That's where I would push back on why would anybody take the St. John's job?
Sure. For what it's worth, I understand why people will take the St. John's job. It's just kind of it's also it's in theory, yes, but also it's been a really long time since anybody's actually done that at St. John's.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I wanted to throw out there.
Go ahead. No, keep going.
It is, to use your phrase, laugh out loud funny that St. John's is simultaneously hiring Rick Pitino and trying to fire Mike Anderson for cause. Laugh out loud funny.
Yeah, you can tell me that all these colleges and programs have their best interests at heart. You can tell me that, but there are maybe I could count on my hand the number of athletic programs that I actually feel have good intentions. On one hand, Not even my alma mater do I feel like have good intentions. Not even the Butler athletic department. But that's just my skepticism at this point about college athletics more than anything else.
Well, Rick Pitino said he runs a clean program, so.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, he did. I'm pretty sure I saw that somewhere.
I'm sure you're right. It's just like, did he wear a clown mask while he was doing it? Is he like painting Joker makeup on his face while he's doing it? Because you know what that is, Josh? You know what that is, Josh? That's a joke. That's a joke, right? Yeah, that's
it sounds really like bad. The quote was, "I've made my mistakes, but I've always run a clean program."
Stop
it's
it.
One headline I found. We don't need to dwell on that anymore.
The over under on Richard Pitino St. John's years is 5.5. Right, one cycle plus a year.
Under.
Is it under because does St. John's try to fire him for cause?
I mean, that's a factor.
Does he get fired? Does he get fired for his performance on the floor or off of it?
I'll say on. But to me, it's going to be he's going to retire in 3 or 4 because it's not actually happening. Which may come back to be a really stupid take if he gets this thing going.
I will say it's like this is if I was a St. John's fan, this is the first hire I would have been inspired by.
Oh, 100%.
I can see, because with all due respect to Mike Anderson, probably wasn't going to turn it around at St. John's.
No,
Steve Mullins probably wasn't going to turn it
Chris
around
Mullins.
at St. John's. Chris Mullins, sorry. What did I say? Steve? I don't know who Steve Mullins is. Chris Mullins. I know who Sean Mullins is. That's an artist. I don't know who Steve Mullins is. Chris Mullins.
Yeah. Right. This is not just trying to make the NCAA tournament. This could go back to being consistently one of the 20 best programs in the country if he gets this thing going. Because he has an ability to elevate players and elevate a program that you can count on one hand the amount of coaches available, the amount of coaches in the country right now that can do what Rick Pitino can do. The question is whether he can do it and whether he can do it fast enough. Mm-hmm. But you're absolutely right. There is a reason that they are willing to simultaneously try and fire Mike Anderson for cause and hire Rick Pitino with all of his baggage, because that dude can get you places that nobody else who has taken that job can.
What's the lowest bar of success? What's the lowest you'll go to define success?
As in his tenure there was successful?
Mm-hmm.
I'll say 3 NCAA tournaments in the Sweet 16 in the next 5 years. That's a pretty low bar.
You think 3 NCAA tournaments in 5 years?
To hire him, right?
Okay.
You are hiring him to win.
Sure.
Because clearly you don't care about any of the other stuff. That's a very specific bar to him, not to that job, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Because it's not worth it to hire him if he's just going to get you to an NCAA tournament every once in a while.
Fair.
That's my logic.
You need to sports watch people with your success.
Exactly. Yes.
Fair. Okay, let's go to Cooley. We'll stay in the Big East. Cooley making the jump from Providence to Georgetown. And I got one thing to say over everything else. Georgetown is a better job than Providence.
100%.
I don't understand why, we can be pissy that as a Providence fan that he left to go to Georgetown. We that is totally valid. But anything to suggest that Georgetown is not the third best job at worst in the Big East, right?
It's an interesting question.
Villanova, UConn?
Xavier?
Maybe. Historically,
Creighton,
no.
Creighton,
but
maybe. Right. Oh, right.
But the right hire, you can make the right hire at those other schools and it's still not necessarily work out ultimately. You can make, like, if Ed Cooley is, and like, right, ideally Ed Cooley is 15 years younger, but like you make the right hire at Georgetown and the possibilities are endless. Like, so let's just, like, we can start there, we can go elsewhere, but like, I don't understand the concept that like you can, but like, talk about the clown mask. You and Richard Pitino can get into a room together and quote things out and put clown masks while you do it at the same time. We can have all the opinions we want, but it is not up for debate which job is better. And it also, and the other part of this I want to talk about is why he wasn't the coach 5 years ago if this was so easy for Georgetown to make happen. And maybe it was just a Ewing and the Thompson family thing. Maybe that's just what it was. And if that's the case, then that's totally legitimate. But it's about the only thing that I can come up with that makes sense.
Well, he's the only coach, if I've got this correct, since John Thompson II, that's not connected to John Thompson II.
Right. Exactly. So like that's got to be it. That like the Thompson family just has a stature at Georgetown that they basically got to handpick to the next head coach.
And if Patrick Ewing wants to be your coach, I mean,
right. But also, if like he's not getting endorsement from the Thompsons and Patrick Ewing wants your job and Ed Cooley wants your job, like Ed Cooley should probably get your job if you're actually interested in winning basketball games. But I'm guessing it was this is who I want to be the next head coach of Georgetown kind of thing, which is totally fine. But yeah, this is a better job. And if the guy has wanted it for half a decade, like he's going to parlay his success at Providence into this Georgetown job. He's just going to do it.
Now, it's interesting because he talked a lot about wanting something new and wanting a change. So in terms of why this didn't happen earlier, that's part of it too.
Sure.
I'm not sure he would have taken this job.
Maybe not, but
originally when you and I were talking about it, I was of the exact same mindset before hearing him speak. Was just, right, if he was so happy to jump ship, why weren't you doing everything you could to make that happen sooner if you knew that this was something you could pull off?
Like, why weren't you calling Georgetown the last time it was open? It's like, hey, I want your job, by the way.
I do. It sounds like there has been a change in mindset that led him to decide that he wanted to do something new. If you want to believe what Ed Cooley's saying, and why would Ed Cooley have reason to lie about that? Especially when, he was coaching in his hometown basically and could have been there forever, right?
Yeah.
The part of this that is interesting to me is the calculation aspect, because you're absolutely right. It's far and away a better job. It's also going from a place where you just won a regular season championship in that conference to a program that can't hold on to a roster. Now, will Ed Cooley change that? Quite possibly, right? But Georgetown's roster looks completely different year to year because there are guys leaving through the transfer portal every single season. And not just players, but the best players on the team.
Sure.
Right, this program is so far away from being anything but bad. Now, also in the world of transfer portal and one-time transfers without penalty, you can rebuild that very quickly, right?
And
go see what Kansas, and then go see what Kansas State just did. There were 2 players from that team last season, and Jerome Tang just said, "I'll take everybody."
Yeah,
all these open roster spots.
inheriting a quote unquote bad team is not an excuse anymore. It's just not.
Right. And especially if those players are leaving, it just lets you go pick your guys. So that has changed the conversation. It's just interesting to me that he took a rebuild rather than, and again, maybe this job just wasn't out there and he decided he wanted a new challenge. His daughter is also, I believe, a student there right now. He mentioned that as well. So and obviously he's got a huge respect for the Thompson family, and there are things that would pull him to Georgetown specifically. It's just interesting to me because I always saw it as Ed Cooley would only leave for a massive step up.
Mm-hmm.
To me, this is a step up, but not a massive step up.
And go ahead.
your chances of making a Final Four, to your original point, significantly higher at Georgetown. It's going to take a lot of work to get to that point because you got to kind of get people excited about Georgetown basketball again first. But you do have a much easier path to where you ultimately want to be than he did a week ago before he took this job.
Yeah, that would be my pushback, and I am 1 second here. I was trying to go fast enough to pull up both tabs I was trying to pull up, and I've now done it. First of all, I would actually call it a massive step up, and the only reason it's not seen wholeheartedly as that by everybody is like you just called Georgetown a step up, and Georgetown went what this year? 7-25, and is 2-37 in Big East games in the last 2 years, and you still, and 13-50 overall, and you still just called Georgetown a step up. So, like, Providence won the Big East last year,
right,
and Providence went to the tournament again this year, and still you just called the Georgetown job a step up, which I would argue means that it's actually a massive step up, because if Georgetown showed any sign of success anytime recently, it would be seen as closer to that. The other thing I'll say is, so you would consider the last 10 years of Providence basketball the best ever, the best stretch of Providence basketball ever. Like we're talking, like they lost in the regional final with Pete Gillen in 1967.
There's a Final Four in there.
1996. The Final Four.
Speaking of Rick Pitino.
The Final Four is 1986. Holy crap, can we talk about how long Pitino's been coaching? 1986, 87. So the 87 NCAA tournament was the national semifinal. They had not been to the tournament since the mid-70s, and they did not win a tournament game until they went to the Elite Eight with Pete Gillen 10 years later. Okay?
Okay,
in the
so
last
then,
10 years
yes.
of Providence, they've been to the tournament 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 of the last 10 tournaments. But they only got past the second round once, and that was last year when they got the Sweet 16. Georgetown has been to at least the third round 1, 2, 3, 4 times since 2005. So,
and that also includes losing to FGCU as a 2 seed.
So as bad as Georgetown has been as of late, if you just bump it back 20 years, they've still boat raced Providence in terms of NCAA tournament success. And when you put that with the history and the fact that it is like if you told me, if someone came from the future and told me that Georgetown went to the Sweet 16 next year because Cooley put together a roster and the Georgetown powers that be said, here's $5 million, through whatever channels are legally given those $5 million. Here's $5 million. Go recruit. Here's $5 million. Go do it. Go get us a roster that is talented enough to make it run in the tournament, because between the transfer portal and NIL, we can turn this around immediately. And I would not be totally stunned. And I think that Ed Cooley, got to the point where I kind of just we've hit the ceiling here at Providence. We have.
Yep.
And that just might be, it's like someone bouncing a job from one job to another, and any other, the ceiling is just higher. And Ed Cooley has run into the ceiling at Providence enough times that I can understand I'm going to go to a place where the ceiling is higher, even if the floor is pretty low right now.
Yeah. The final thing I'll say in terms of why I don't consider it a massive, massive step up is we don't know what Georgetown looks like in this NIL era yet.
Sure.
Because there will always be this hesitation with me from a basketball first school trying to compete. Now, Georgetown's alumni network is a little bit different because of the prestige the school has and the prestige of the program. It's it's also difficult to generate that money when you don't have football behind it. So I just don't know, because it's also right. It's also entirely possible that's what the sell to Cooley was. Is look, we'll get you the money. We're ready to invest in this thing. We are tired of being way, way, way worse and embarrassing the legacy of Georgetown, basically. Right? I mean, that's what the last decade has been for the most part.
Yeah,
we're going to do what it takes to get this thing back on track where it should be, and that could very well happen because the beauty of this is you can turn it around immediately. I just need to see that actually happen before I'm convinced that's what this is going to be, where all of a sudden they're right there in the thick of the quote-unquote NIL race.
Sure. And I just believe that all of those things you just said will add up to we're ready to be in the NIL race.
Mm-hmm. And it's, entirely possible. And that's something that you're not going to get that opportunity at Providence.
So, and that's where I ultimately come down. Okay, last one.
So, speaking of Providence, real quick before we get to this next one.
Yeah,
excellent hire, Kim English. Big fan of that.
Yeah, big fan. Kim English, high quality basketball coach.
Yeah,
for sure. Last but not least, Micah Shrewsberry. On his way.
Home, kind of.
On his way. Yeah, Indiana guy. Grew up in Indianapolis. And he's on his way to Notre Dame. And listen, I think if you're a Big Ten fan for a school not named Penn State, that you're pretty happy with this because Micah Shrewsberry and the Nittany Lions were coming, and he quickly parlayed his success at Penn State into a hire at Notre Dame.
Does he take this job if it's not in Indiana?
It's a good question. I don't know. But where I wanted to start with this more than anything else, and why, if you gave me the schools without any locations, why I think the answer might still be yes, is that, like, there are 18 Notre Dame all-time recruits that are higher ranked than the second highest ranked recruit in Penn State history. 18. And on that list are J.J. Starling, class of 2022. Ben Allen Lubin, class of 2022. Nate Laszewski, class of 2018. This is high school graduating year. Those were all in the top 10. My point being, and you can go down the list, deeper. Robbie Carmody, class of 2018. You have to get all the way to, I think, the 18th ranked guy, is what I said, before you get to the second highest ranked Penn State guy. Even in J.J. Starling is the highest recruit in Notre Dame history, and he was a freshman this past year. So
also
even
in the transfer portal.
Say that again.
Oh, also in the transfer portal. Just
who? J.J. Starling?
Yeah.
The point being is that even though Penn State's arrow is pointing up and Notre Dame's arrow is pointing down, it still doesn't matter. It's just a higher, like, that you can recruit better at one place than you can the other, which is why I might lean towards yes, he would take the job, even if it wasn't in Indiana. But if he was on the fence at all, it being in Indiana was going to send him over the Fighting Irish edge.
Yeah, J.J. Starling is heading to Syracuse, which is a conversation for another day.
Oh, no. I didn't mean on his team now necessarily.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. My point
Sorry,
was...
I misunderstood you. My bad. Yes.
Yeah,
no J.J. Starling on his team, but still.
Yeah. You were able to recruit, and then bad season, J.J. Starling gone. You know. But, absolutely. Your point is valid that you can get a level of player at Notre Dame that historically Penn State has not been able to get. And that is 100% a reason to. At this moment in time, Notre Dame is the better job. And right, you throw on top of that the ability to be close to home. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I just have, and this is similar to my Georgetown thing, except for the opposite. You look at what's happened to Alabama, what's happened to Auburn, what's happened to, can I think of any other schools off the top of my head? Baylor. There are Arkansas, right? These football schools with the big brands and all the money and what they've been able to do when they choose to invest in men's basketball.
UCLA? Is UCLA on there?
UCLA is a basketball school.
I mean, I guess the history of their basketball program is better than the history of their football program.
I don't
but
consider,
they make more money off their football program.
Sure, well, right, because I know. I don't put UCLA in this conversation.
Duke is a basketball school, but they still have an ACC football program that shovels in money.
You said who? Syracuse?
Duke.
Oh, right. Yes, yeah. But people care a lot more about Duke basketball than football. That's my point.
Sure.
Okay, right. If you're those SEC schools care way more about football than basketball.
Yeah.
That's where I'm drawing the distinction.
Okay, fair.
But Nate Oates is getting whatever he wants at Alabama. Eric Musselman's getting whatever he wants at Arkansas. Bruce Pearl's getting whatever he wants at. You can go down the list. Penn State's the kind of school that can do that. And all of a sudden, you're having a very different conversation. Now, would that actually have happened? Who knows? Obviously, Micah Shrewsberry.
Notre Dame's also one of those schools, though.
Mm-hmm. Sure, right, absolutely. Football first, but that's Notre Dame just is interesting because there are some hurdles, there are some challenges. It's in this weird spot, but also it's Notre Dame. So that I'm just kind of disappointed. It's a home run hire for Notre Dame. Home run. I'm just kind of disappointed we don't get to see Shrewsberry do this at Penn State because Penn State, if he stays for a decade, Penn State basketball looks very, very different. I really feel like they were this close. And maybe they find the right person to follow him up and they still get there. But you have to have the coach and you have to have the success to motivate you to put the money in. To go, hey, if we just give this guy a little bit more, we can turn ourselves into what Alabama has become. Where it's just an elite men's basketball program now. Mm-hmm. Penn State had a way to go, but they were on that track. And Shrewsberry decided to take the Notre Dame. That's just the resources and the ability you have when you're that kind of brand. And Georgetown's a different kind of brand. But that was one of the things I was thinking about is there's just this endless potential at a school like Penn State if everybody gets behind the men's basketball program. And maybe they just never will. Mm-hmm. At which point, you absolutely go take the Notre Dame job because your chances are better there.
Yeah, I think at some point, like NIL changes the discussion a little bit in terms of how you can invest in your basketball programs. But like, it's not like Penn State just arrived in the Big Ten. It's not like Penn State just arrived in we have the money to support our basketball program.
Absolutely true.
World. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's a program that's been to the tournament 4 times since 1965.
Right. The support has never been there. Yeah.
So maybe like absolutely valid. And would Shrewsberry, I think, turn it into a program that almost would demand that the university put money into it? Yeah.
Right. You got to have the coach and the success to make somebody want to elevate you to that level.
Right. Yeah. And I think, and I would agree that I think he would have been able to do that. But like, this is a school that, like, Pat Chambers was there from 2011 to 2020 and didn't make a tournament. He was there for a decade and didn't make a tournament. To me, that screams a school that's not all that interested in really putting effort into their basketball program. Because the schools that do, and like Holtman might have saved his job by what happened at Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament. And I feel like he would have been fired already if he was going to get fired this offseason.
That's another good example. Mm-hmm.
But like if he doesn't have a good year next year, he's gone.
Yeah.
Like he's going to get fired.
Yep.
And Ohio State has a history of investing in their basketball program, and when it's not going well, changing their basketball program.
Yep.
And Penn State just doesn't. Like Northwestern's basketball program, respectable, has gotten to a point where they every few years put together a team that can compete. Like we're threatening with a pattern here, right? You had the team with McIntosh, and that was good, and you had this team with Boo Buie last year. Like, but that's also a school that has more things to worry about than supporting their men's basketball program.
Right.
That's why Collins is still there, respectfully. Collins is a fine basketball coach. He would have been fired a long time ago at any other Big Ten school, except maybe Penn State.
Yeah.
And I think that's I think that's part of it as well.
Yeah. Now, Markquis also had his struggles in terms of getting the support he wanted from Notre Dame. So it's not like.
Sure. And we also don't really know because like Notre Dame just kind of stumbled into a all-time level basketball coach.
Right. Where he was making just the absolute most out of what he was given. Yeah. So maybe Notre Dame, maybe that's what Notre Dame is selling is we're similar to Georgetown. We're ready to take this jump. If you take this job, we're going to back you to give you everything you need to turn this into a really, really good program. Yeah. Which at that point you're jumping because you have from a track record standpoint, no indication that's happening at Penn State. That you kind of have to do the work to convince Penn State to make that happen. Whereas your work at Penn State can convince somebody else to open the door who wants to invest and believes you're the person that can make it happen and maximize everything. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. You got anything else on coaches, tournament, anything? It's been 80 minutes.
Yeah. I think we should get out of here.
I think you're right. We'll be back tomorrow with a slightly shorter podcast. Not slightly shorter, a way shorter podcast. Roughly, I mean, we finished up with the Sweet 16 games 40 minutes ago. So we won't be quite this long, but if you listen to the entire pod, we appreciate you. And we'll be back on Saturday morning to chat about whatever happens on Friday night. Please subscribe to the Jays for Days podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at Jays for Days Pod. If you like the YouTube, if you like video versions of podcasts, you can find the video version of this podcast on our YouTube channel, Jays for Days Podcast. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Jays for Days podcast. I'm Josh. He's Josh. And we will see you later.